They don't run their empires from smoky back rooms or Instagram bravado. They run them from boardrooms, kitchens, car backseats, and numbers that never quite add up. While the world fixates on headline-grabbing kingpins, a quieter dynasty has been writing the rules, balancing ledgers, buying judges, moving steel containers across oceans, and cash through cities that never sleep. These are the women who didn't inherit power. They perfected it. This countdown reveals the top 10 female mafia bosses still ruling in 2025, women who quietly run global empires through strategy, money, and influence rather than headlines. From Mexico to Italy, they control ports, banks, and criminal networks with patience and precision. Each entry uncovers who's still free, who's truly in charge, and how they've outlasted rivals and investigations. The real danger? Their power lies not in what you see, but in the moves you never notice until it's too late. Welcome back to our channel, the place where we uncover the darkest and most shocking true crime stories from around the world. If you love crime mysteries and real-life horror, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Number 10. Sandra Avila Beltran, La Reina del Pacifico, Mexico. In the mythology of the cartel world, power is loud. In the files that built Sandra Avila Beltran's legend, power was fluent in silence, schedules, and the math of silent movement. Journalists dubbed her La Reina del Pacifico. Authorities allege she helped stitch together a seamless corridor: Colombian supply to Mexican distribution, Pacific ports to U.S. markets, an invisible hand that favored discretion over spectacle. Sandra Avila's story bends along two tracks: the public icon and the case. The icon is the elegant woman in press photos, sunglasses angled just so, a nickname that invited comparisons to television fiction. Mexican and U.S. officials long asserted she operated as a broker and fixer, the person who could make rivals sit at the same table, translate the priorities of Colombians to Mexicans, and smooth the logistics that turn a plan into a shipment. Media also repeated, with varying precision, claims of family ties to historic Guadalajara cartel figures. Avila herself has pushed back on some of those narratives, insisting that notoriety filled in blanks the evidence could not. By the mid-2000s, a quieter name in U.S. case files began appearing beside hers: Juan Diego Espinoza Ramirez, El Tiger, linked by authorities to Colombia's Norte del Valle network. Prosecutors later argued the pair formed a functional partnership. Him on the supply side, her as a strategic bridge into Mexico's Pacific corridor, including contacts within the Sinaloa sphere. In public, Avila projected confidence and normalcy. In official paperwork, she was described as the adult in the room, the one who preferred balance sheets to bravado. The equilibrium cracked in 2007. That September, Mexican federal agents detained Avila in Mexico City after months of surveillance. The photographs, straight hair, black blouse, a look that read more corporate than criminal, rocketed through front pages. For some, they confirmed the myth. For others, they made it harder to separate evidence from image. The government introduced allegations of money laundering and organized crime, seized properties, and promised a high-profile prosecution. Avila, for her part, maintained she was not a trafficker, and that her wealth came from legitimate businesses, claims she would repeat in interviews. Her legal saga spanned 2 countries and multiple turns. In Mexico, parts of the first case stumbled. Courts acquitted her of organized crime charges, while money laundering counts went through appeals and were refiled. In 2012, after years in Mexican custody, she was extradited to the United States to face a narrower indictment. There, the giant conspiracies of headlines shrank to a specific prosecutable slice: aiding and abetting a trafficking conspiracy tied to known suppliers. In 2013, Avila pleaded guilty to a reduced charge, accessory after the fact, received a 70-month sentence, and was credited for time already served. She was deported to Mexico later that year, briefly rearrested on a domestic money laundering case, and released in 2015 after Mexican courts again pared back the allegations. Legally, those dates are the bones of the story. Around them grew the flesh of a cultural phenomenon. Books and long-form journalism examined how a woman could rise in a trade that often sidelines women to courier or companion roles. Reporters described Avila's alleged comparative advantage as fluency in finance and diplomacy, knowing which accounts a payment should touch, which ports could bear scrutiny, and which egos needed smoothing so that a shipment's calendar held. Where violent bosses made the news, financial operators made the business work. Avila, in this telling, belonged to the second category. Avila herself has tried to reframe the narrative. In interviews and a widely read book of conversations, she rejected the queen pin label, cast doubt on sensational details, and described her prosecution as a product of proximity punished. She implied for who she knew, not what she did. Even critics conceded that the line between myth and documentation blurred as tabloids amplified her image and investigators selectively leaked. But the cross-border case file remains. U.S. prosecutors did not present her as a trigger puller. They presented her as what modern trafficking most needs: a coordinator. For law enforcement watchers, Avila's arc became a case study in how power evolves. As cartels fragmented and professionalized, the most valuable players weren't always the loudest or the most feared. They were the ones who could steady a supply chain, price risk, keep factions from feuding long enough to load a container, and make a money trail look like import-export churn. It's not the stuff of narco corridos. It's spreadsheets, phone trees, and good manners masking bad intentions. As of 2025, public reporting places Sandra Avila living quietly in Mexico. No longer a daily headline, sometimes surfacing in interviews or human interest segments, often to disavow the legend that grew around her name. Security analysts speculate carefully that figures with her resume may continue to advise informally, not issuing orders, but offering introductions, pricing intelligence, and do-or-don't counsel to younger operators who now run the lanes she once helped align. Those are assessments, not proven facts. Hard evidence is scarce precisely because, if such influence exists, it is designed to leave no fingerprints. There is a final lesson hidden inside the nickname that once defined her. Queen of the Pacific sounds like a coronation, a singular power atop a pyramid. The modern underworld is not a pyramid. It's a network. In networks, crowns are less valuable than keys. To accounts, to ports, to relationships. Sandra Avila Beltran's legacy, as drawn by indictments, judicial decisions, and the cautious consensus of investigators, is not that she ruled by fear. It's that she allegedly made complex things simple and kept complicated people from breaking the machine. That is why her story endures after the mugshots faded and the charges were counted down. It asks an uncomfortable question about how organized crime survives, not through constant war, but through competent logistics. The faces on wanted posters change. The math of movement does not. If Avila truly walked away in 2015, then the most powerful part of her career was never a throne. It was a playbook, one that others can now run without ever saying her name. Number 9. Maria Licciardi. La Madrina, Italy, Camorra, Naples. In the labyrinth of Naples, where narrow alleys twist between faded tenements and laundry lines sway like flags of survival, the Camorra is not just an organization, it is an atmosphere. Among its countless clans, one name has carried a particular weight for decades: Licciardi. And at the center of that name stood Maria Licciardi, known across Italy and beyond as La Madrina, the godmother. Unlike the cinematic images of mafia dons in sharp suits, Maria Licciardi's strength was quiet, precise, and deeply rooted in family discipline. She inherited the clan's reins in the 1990s after the death of her brother, Gennaro, a figure who had helped shape the modern Camorra. Where he had been brash, Maria was calculating. Where others flaunted, she organized. Her power wasn't built on the display of violence, but on the efficiency of control. The Licciardi clan, based in the Secondigliano district of Naples, became one of the city's most powerful mafia groups under her direction. Maria transformed what had been a chaotic criminal landscape into a systematic enterprise. She was infamous for tight rules, no unnecessary killings, no uncontrolled street fights, no flamboyance that might draw police heat. To many, she was the opposite of the stereotype, a boss who ran her world like a strict accountant, not a gangster out of control. But don't mistake discipline for mercy. Under her command, the Licciardi clan expanded into drug trafficking, extortion rackets, counterfeit goods, and prostitution networks. She mastered the wholesale cocaine and heroin trades, securing alliances that stretched from South America to Spain, and her clan's financial backbone came from flooding Naples with narcotics. Locals whispered that even the smallest drug corner in the city owed tribute to La Madrina. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Italian prosecutors considered her one of the most dangerous women in Europe, she was the first woman to be listed among Italy's 30 most wanted criminals. Interpol bulletins described her as ruthless, strategic, and elusive. Police raids constantly targeted her clan's safe houses, but Maria always seemed to be a step ahead. Her leadership style became legendary within Camorra folklore. Where hot-headed bosses crumbled under wiretaps and betrayals, Maria operated through a layered chain of command, rarely giving direct orders, preferring to let relatives and loyal lieutenants manage the day-to-day. She was a ghost in her own empire, rarely photographed, seldom heard, but always felt. The turning point came in 2001 when Italian authorities finally captured her after years on the run. She served a sentence for mafia association, but, upon release, slid back into her family's shadowed empire. The Licciardi clan, despite police pressure, never truly lost its grip on Naples' underworld. In August 2021, Maria Licciardi made headlines again. At Rome's Ciampino airport, just as she was boarding a flight to Spain, Italian police arrested her in a precision operation. The charges: mafia association, extortion, and running a powerful criminal network that funneled drugs and counterfeit goods through Naples. At 70 years old, she showed little reaction. Photographs from the arrest show a calm, almost resigned woman, as if she had long accepted that her life would swing between cells and control. Today, in 2025, Maria Licciardi is serving her time in an Italian prison. Her age and health are constant subjects of media speculation, but the real intrigue lies in what happens outside those prison walls. Reports suggest that her clan continues to function under trusted relatives, a testament to the infrastructure she cemented years ago. For Camorra clans, prison is often a pause, not an end. And the Licciardi machine still collects its extortion fees, still profits from narcotics, and still maintains its reputation as one of Naples' most disciplined mafia families. To criminologists, her story is unique. In a world dominated by men, Maria Licciardi proved that criminal power does not always roar. It whispers, calculates, and endures. She didn't seek fame, yet her name became infamous. She didn't display violence, yet her rules enforced fear. And even behind bars, her clan still thrives, a reminder that in Naples, the Camorra is not a person. It's a dynasty. Her fate is sealed in prison walls, but her legacy of organization continues to ripple through the streets of Naples. Where extortion notes are still delivered, counterfeit designer bags still change hands, and drugs still flow through the veins of the city. La Madrina may no longer walk the alleys of Secondigliano, but the system she perfected still rules them. Number 8. Claudia Ochoa Felix. The Empress of Antrax, Mexico. Culiacan has its own rhythm, trucks with darkened windows gliding past neon-lit Marisquerias, corridos spilling from backyard speakers, a city where rumor travels faster than any headline. In the 2010s, one name moved through that rumor mill with unusual speed: Claudia Ochoa Felix. She was photographed in designer sunglasses and red lipstick, posted images from box seats and beach villas, and carried a nickname the internet couldn't resist: La Emperatriz de los Antrax, the Empress of Antrax, a reference to Los Antrax, an armed wing long linked in reporting to the Sinaloa cartel. The label made for addictive headlines. It also blurred fact and spectacle. Mexican outlets and international tabloids cast her as a successor to José Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, El Chino Antrax, the group's most famous figure, arrested in 2013. Yet authorities never formally confirmed her as the head of Los Antrax, and Ochoa Felix publicly denied being a cartel boss, threatening legal action when stories strayed into invention. That tension between verified cases and viral myth became the frame of her public life. What was verifiable was the social media phenomenon. At a time when traditional bosses kept to the shadows, Ochoa Felix curated a glossy, sometimes provocative feed that mixed family snapshots with symbols the press interpreted as narco-coded, high-end weapons photographed like accessories, exotic cars guarded parties. Whether those posts projected real power or borrowed aura, they reframed the image of women around organized crime, no longer just companions in the background of a man's story, but front and center figures shaping their own narrative. For a generation raised on Instagram, she became an algorithm's dream, crime-adjacent glamour without the paperwork to pin it down. Behind the online persona lay a city crowded with competing storylines. Culiacan has long been mapped by alliances, bloodlines, and business fronts. In that ecosystem, a person's public image can become a tool shield, threat, or decoy. Sources close to law enforcement describe Ochoa Felix less as a battlefield commander and more, if anything, as a connector. Someone who moved in circles where information, introductions, and loyalty had currency. It's a role common to modern criminal networks, where logistics and reputation can matter as much as force. Her notoriety surged precisely because she stood at the crossroads of three currents: a powerful city's underworld, a media culture hungry for archetypes, and a social platform built to amplify spectacle. Each new photo multiplied the myth. Each denial multiplied the clicks. Meanwhile, the Los Antrax storyline continued to mutate. Arrests, extraditions, internal fractures, and reconstituted cells, reminding observers that a name on a banner doesn't always describe the reality on the ground. In September 2019, the narrative swerved. Local authorities in Sinaloa reported Claudia Ochoa Felix deceased in Culiacan after a night out. Early official statements spoke of respiratory failure consistent with pulmonary edema. Investigators said there were no signs of violence. The bare facts were somber and prosaic, a door quietly closing on a public figure whose life had been anything but quiet online. Almost immediately, the vacuum filled with speculation. Some insisted it was foul play disguised as misfortune. Others claimed she had faked her death, a theory recycled whenever a high-profile figure vanishes from view. None of those claims advanced beyond rumor. The weight of official reporting has remained the same. Claudia Ochoa Felix died in Ardingito in Culiacan. The case did not produce charges of homicide. Why then does her legend persist in 2025? Partly because the narco-celebrity template endures. The fusion of crime lore, fashion, and curated persona didn't disappear with one account. It spread. Partly because Ochoa Felix became a mirror for a broader cultural argument. What does it mean when power is illustrated less by indictments than by influence? By who you can call and who will call you back? And partly because the public craves endings that feel mythic, not mundane. A sudden contested death at 35 is the sort of unresolved chord that keeps a ballad alive. There's also a gendered angle to the persistence of her story. Women connected to organized crime have often been written as foils, muses, molls, or mourning figures. Ochoa Felix complicated that script. Whether or not she commanded operational authority, she commanded attention, and attention itself has power. Opening doors, chilling critics, fogging the lens through which prosecutors and journalists try to see. In that sense, her influence was modern. An economy of optics layered atop the traditional economies of contraband and cash. For researchers, the cautionary lesson is twofold. First, separate documentation from performance. The internet can mint royalty with a ring light. Courts do it with evidence. Second, recognize that status in criminal ecosystems is fluid. 1 month's empress may be the next month's exile. One clan's symbol can be another's liability. As for the question people still whisper, is she truly gone? The answer that holds in 2025 is the only responsible one. Officially, yes. Claims of a low-profile survival circulate like urban legends, but they remain unsubstantiated. If you strip away the mythology and scroll back to the beginning, Claudia Ochoa Felix was a sign of her time. She understood how attention works in the 21st century and how to dress it in the symbols a particular audience recognizes. Whether that attention reflected actual command or cleverly borrowed the optics of command is the distinction that official records never resolved. What the record does show is a life that intersected with power, a city that amplifies narratives, and a moment when being seen became its own kind of currency. Number 7. Rosetta Cutolo, La Regina di Camorra, Italy. In the shadowy underworld of Naples, one name carries weight not only because of the violence and money it conjures, but because of the family bond that reshaped the Camorra. Rosetta Cutolo, sister of the infamous boss Raffaele Cutolo, founder of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata (NCO. While her brother earned a reputation as the professor of crime, dictating orders even from behind prison walls, it was Rosetta who ensured those orders were carried out, making her one of the most remarkable female figures in Italian mafia history. When Raffaele Cutolo was imprisoned in the late 1970s, the Camorra needed someone it could trust to handle its delicate operations on the outside. That person was Rosetta. Unlike many women in organized crime who stayed behind the curtains, Rosetta stepped directly into the role of strategist and negotiator. She became her brother's voice, his proxy, and by many accounts, the true operator of the NCO during its most powerful years. She managed financial negotiations, pacts with other clans, and political dealings, ensuring that her brother's empire kept running smoothly while he was locked away. Rosetta was known for her cold efficiency and discretion. Rarely photographed, seldom appearing in public, yet always present in the whispered accounts of police informants and rival clans. Investigators described her as the brains behind the throne, orchestrating alliances with her sharp intellect rather than brute force. Throughout the 1980s, as the NCO waged bloody wars against rival Camorra clans and tightened its grip on Naples, Rosetta was there, steering the clan through the turbulence. She controlled finances, made key decisions in extortion rackets, and supervised drug trafficking deals. Her ability to keep the NCO's business machinery alive despite her brother's imprisonment earned her the nickname La Regina di Camorra, the Queen of the Camorra. But with notoriety came danger. The Italian state had long been at war with organized crime, and Rosetta became a target for prosecutors and investigators. Unlike her brother, who was a flamboyant, ideological figure, Rosetta kept a low profile. She was not the type to issue public statements or court celebrity. Instead, her reputation was built on quiet power, phone calls, coded messages, and the unseen hands that moved money and alliances. In the 1990s and 2000s, as her brother's power waned and the Italian government intensified its crackdown on mafia clans, Rosetta slowly retreated from the front lines. The NCO fragmented, and the Camorra reorganized into smaller, decentralized groups. Rosetta avoided the spotlight and managed to escape the long prison sentences that crushed so many other mafia figures. Unlike her brother, who remained behind bars until his death in 2021, Rosetta aged outside the walls watched, but never completely silenced. By 2025, Rosetta Cutolo is an elderly woman, her once feared influence reduced but not erased. Italian law enforcement keeps her under surveillance, aware that even in her advanced years, her symbolic presence still matters. To the younger generation of Camorristi, she represents a living link to the old guard, a reminder of the time when one family, through a brother's charisma and a sister's iron discipline, nearly bent Naples to their will. She may no longer be active in extortion rackets or drug negotiations, but in the intricate web of mafia memory and respect, symbols are as important as soldiers. For many in the Camorra, Rosetta is still La Regina, a woman who proved that power in the mafia is not only about who pulls the trigger, but also about who controls the conversations, the alliances, and the money. As of 2025, she is living quietly under watch in Italy, elderly and largely retired. But her legacy and symbolic influence as one of the most powerful women in Camorra history remain intact. Number 6. Enadina Arellano Felix. La Jefa, Mexico, Tijuana Cartel. At the San Isidro port of entry, the traffic never really stops. Tourists, commuters, cargo, a tide of steel and paperwork moving north and south every hour of every day. For years, investigators said the real power in Tijuana wasn't the convoy with guns. It was the ledger that balanced all this motion. That is the world Enadina Arellano Felix is alleged to have mastered. Where her brothers built the Arellano Felix organization, AFO, into one of the most feared cartels of the 1990s, she became known not for shootouts but for spreadsheets, front companies, and financial control. It's why people called her La Jefa, the boss, the one who kept the machine from seizing up. The Arellano name once cast a long shadow from Baja California through the borderlands. Benjamin was the administrator, Ramon the enforcer, and other siblings and cousins filled out a network that taxed, trafficked, and terrorized. Then came the early 2000s collapse. Ramon killed in Arlingniar. Benjamin arrested the same year, Francisco Javier captured in 2006, Eduardo in 2008. What followed could have been the end splinter groups, turf wars, defections to rivals. But out of that turmoil, reporting began to converge on a quieter fact. Enadina, long portrayed as the family's financial mind, had stepped forward to stabilize what remained. Her power, according to court files and analyst briefings, wasn't the power that poses for cameras. It was the power that reconciles accounts across continents, keeps suppliers calm when a shipment is delayed, and talks hot heads into cold choices. Where the AFO once tried to control the gateway with open violence, Enadina's alleged strategy was professionalization turned chaos into contracts, Brute force into pricing, feuds into arrangements. That meant laundering revenue through import-export firms, retail fronts, and real estate, and preferring an accountant's whisper to a sicario's threat. The mid to late 2000s were a stress test. Tijuana bled as Teodoro Garcia Cemental El Teo broke from the old guard and aligned himself differently, unleashing a wave of kidnappings and headlines that scorched the city's image. In this period, sources say Enadina's circle prioritized containment, limit public carnage that triggers federal heat, tax routes rather than own every risk. Except that the era of all-out monopoly was over. If rivals, especially across the state line with Sinaloa factions, could be given a tariff-like peace, the AFO could survive as a broker instead of die as a besieged king. Two facts reinforce the story of La Jefa. First, multiple US and Mexican actions named her as a financial operator, the kind of target added to sanction lists that squeeze bank access and shadow companies. Second, when a relative widely described as a family heir apparent, Fernando Sanchez Arellano, El Ingeniero, was arrested in 2014, the AFO did not instantly vanish. It shrunk, mutated, and persisted, the way networks do when their value is relationships and logistics rather than a single public face. Depending on which investigative file you read, Fernando is described as Enadina's son or nephew. The family has kept those lines deliberately blurred. Either way, analysts viewed the two as complementary. Operational front and financial back office, holding a battered organization together with discipline. What made Enadina distinctive wasn't just that she was a woman holding a senior role in a male-dominated underworld. It was how she allegedly held it. She favored risk management over ritual dominance, reduce volatility, avoid spectacle, outlast. Off sources that once bragged about ruling by fear found themselves managing service-level agreements in all but name. Who pays, how much, when, and what happens when a truck breaks down on the Mex 1 at dusk? Those were the questions that mattered. In the modern border economy, predictability is profit. The myth of the cartel as a permanent war machine gives way, upon closer inspection, to something both more mundane and more durable. Logistics. That isn't to romanticize the business. The streams Enadina is alleged to have engineered cocaine, methamphetamine, fentanyl precursors, translate into real harm for real communities. If anything, her reputation as a stabilizer worries veteran investigators more than the headline-chasing warlords do. Violence burns itself out. Competent administration keeps revenue flowing quietly for years. When the world looks for villains in ballistic vests, the most consequential figures may be those behind a desk, converting tons into cash and cash into clean-looking accounts. Publicly, Enadina rarely appears. On the few occasions her name surfaces, through sanctions notices, leak-driven profiles, or the occasional long-form piece, she is framed as the anti-narco corrida. No videos, no bravado, just the stillness of someone who treats a continent-spanning criminal supply chain like a demanding but solvable math problem. Those who study the AFO say that stillness is deliberate. Chaos draws raids. Balance sheets do not. By the 2010s and into the 2020s, the AFO continued to shed the old skin. It outsourced violence, insourced finance, and accepted that taxation, the so-called piso, could be more profitable and far less deadly than trying to reconquer every street corner. The organization's modern face in Tijuana looks less like an army and more like a toll booth with attorneys. Pay, pass, and don't bring heat. That motto only works if someone trustworthy can clear wires, launder proceeds, and mediate disputes. The repeated consensus places Enadina at the center of that trust. What then of her current fate? Hard evidence is intentionally scarce. As of the last credible public reporting before 2025, she was not in custody, and analysts believed she remained active behind the scenes in Baja California, maintaining a low profile and serving as a strategic advisor rather than a street-level commander. The point of a financial boss is to avoid visible contact with product and violence. If you're looking in the wrong places, you will conclude she has disappeared. If you follow the money, you may conclude the opposite. There is an irony that suits this story. In the 1990s, the Arellano Felix name became shorthand for a cartel that wanted the spotlight, loud, lethal, unavoidable. A generation later, the surviving model associated with Enadina is the opposite. Be forgettable. Let rivals draw attention to themselves. Be the one they have to pay when the trucks roll. If the AFO endures today, it is because someone taught it to act like a business when it could no longer act like a sovereign. As of 2025, it is believed that she has remained active behind the scenes in Baja California. Low profile, finance-focused, and influential as a broker. Public appearances are rare. Credible confirmed sightings are fewer still. In a landscape that rewards invisibility, La Jefa has made absence into an asset. And that's where we'll leave the trail for now. From the silent fixers to the iron-willed matriarchs. These 5 women didn't just survive in a world built to erase them. They engineered it. They stabilized empires, laundered fortunes, and turned fear into policy. But this is only half the ledger. In part 2, we'll dive into the remaining 5. The shadow operators who still move product, price peace, and play governments like markets. Who stepped into the vacuum? Who's ruling from a quiet suburb? Who's in custody and still calling shots? If you're hooked on the truth behind the headlines, like this video to push it to more viewers who think they've seen it all. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2 the moment it drops. Comment below. Which profile shocked you most and who do you think still holds the most power in 2025? Part 2 is coming soon. The names get bigger, the networks get tighter, and the myths? We'll test every single one. Stay ready.